Hey everyone, my name is Alan Gongora. I'm managing partner of Langon Law Group. And today we'll be providing you with a practical checklist you can use to better manage the registration of your new business in Colombia. This is the second in a 4-part series explaining how to start a business in Colombia. If you haven't seen our first video, I highly recommend that you go back and watch it first. As always, let's get started with some things you should consider as we proceed with these particular set of tutorials. These tutorials are intended to help anyone interested in starting a new business in Colombia. For anyone that's potentially purchasing an existing business or maybe expanding an existing business into the Colombian market, you should find these tutorials to be very, very useful. However, do check out our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page, because maybe we have already published additional tutorials that may be more relevant to your own specific legal situation. The difficulty level for these tutorials is basic. This actually means that you don't really need any prior understanding of this process. It also means you don't need any specialized knowledge of the topic, so it should be very, very user-friendly for anyone interested in starting a new business in Colombia. As always, keep in mind that these tutorials are only intended to provide general observations and suggestions. Remember that I'm actually a licensed New York corporate attorney, and while everything you will hear and see has been reviewed and approved by Colombian attorneys, these tutorials are not intended to provide actual legal advice. We highly recommend that you consult with your own local attorney to discuss your own specific legal requirements. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Organizing a solid business plan is particularly important in a place like Colombia. Doing business in Colombia often means a ton of improvising, anticipating way more worst-case scenarios than in other markets, and even leaving your normal business comfort zone on a regular basis. A well-thought-out business plan specific to how business works in Colombia will be invaluable as you start your business. This is something that goes hand in hand with organizing a solid business plan. I mentioned this issue separately because the amount of capital you will invest in your business will determine any number of key issues, including, number 1, registration fees. The more capital you intend to invest in your business, the higher your registration fees. Number 2, franchise taxes. The higher your investment amount, the higher the fees you will need to pay in order to renew your business license, or matrícula mercantil as it is called locally, every year. Number 3, visa application. How much you invest in your business will also impact whether you can apply for what's called a company owner visa, which is currently set at 100 times the local minimum wage. This goes along with our discussion in our first episode regarding how to make decisions in your new company. Bottom line, and just like in most other jurisdictions, if you're going to have partners in your new business, you will need to nail down several key issues before registering your company. Here's just a small sample. Ownership interests. Who gets how many shares and why? Owner contributions. Who will contribute cash, or maybe physical assets, or maybe in-kind contributions? Or finally, a very popular one, sweat equity. Vested shares. Will some or all the owners receive vested compensation? Employment agreements. Will some or all the owners be required to execute a formal employment agreement? Owner exits. How will owners be able to leave the company if they so wish? There are literally dozens and dozens of issues business co-owners need to consider and agree on before they register a company. Once you clarify all main business terms with your partners, your local business lawyer will need to draft relevant legal documentation. In terms of key legal documentation, you should focus on the following. Number 1, company bylaws, which are called estatutos locally. You should see this as the constitution of the company. It will have all the rules that determine how to make decisions in the company, and it will also incorporate a lot of the terms you and your partners have agreed on. And number two, the shareholder agreement, which locally is called the Acuerdo de Accionistas. This is an agreement between the shareholders of the company. It will cover any number of issues that impact the ownership interest of each shareholder. If it has to do with the shares of the company and how shareholders treat each other, chances are that it will be included in the shareholder agreement. Beyond these two main agreements, the shareholders of the company may want to negotiate and execute additional agreements, including, but not limited to, partnership agreements or contratos de promesa de sociedad, buy-sell agreements, confidentiality agreements or acuerdos de confidencialidad, and indemnification agreements or acuerdos de indemnidad. Of all the decisions you will make when starting a business in Colombia, none may be as consequential as who will serve as the legal representative for your business. The legal representative is essentially the day-to-day manager of a company, okay? That means that only the legal representative can sign legal documentation binding the company, hire and fire employees, make general business decisions on behalf of the company, and most important of all, have direct access to all the financial accounts of the company, including the corporate bank account. Here are your options when selecting a legal representative for your Colombian business. Option one, you are the legal representative. This option is only viable if you already have a Colombian visa and have an active cédula, which is a local government ID, and you are in Colombia on a regular basis so that you can sign all the legal documentation for your business when necessary. Option two, a key employee is your legal representative. If you have an employee who you trust to handle this responsibility, this can certainly work. Keep in mind that serving as a legal representative creates potential liability risk for that individual, so expect your employee to request additional compensation. Option three, someone you trust is your legal rep. If you don't have an employee that you can trust, you can always ask someone you know who isn't necessarily connected to your business to serve as a legal representative. Option four, your local attorney is the legal representative. If you cannot serve as a legal representative and cannot locate anyone who you trust to serve in that capacity, ask your local law firm to do it. This is often the best way to ensure that you can easily register your local business without having to worry about giving outsized authority to a third party who may turn out to be completely and utterly irresponsible or potentially worse. Here's our advice on this. From experience, if you cannot manage your business by yourself, we recommend that your local attorney serve as your legal representative instead of company employees. You guys have no idea the issues that come up when local employees serve as legal representatives. Regardless, keep in mind that you can always serve as your own legal representative for your business, even if you don't have a cédula or a visa. You may just have to register a second legal representative in order to be able to manage the local corporate bank account. In terms of registration mechanics, here are your options. Option one, execute documentation in Colombia. If you already have a cédula and will serve as legal representative, the simplest and least expensive option is just to sign the relevant documentation at a local notary when you are physically in Colombia. This will also apply if your local attorney or other trusted local agent will serve as the legal representative and they are already physically present in Colombia. Option two, execute documentation at foreign consulate. If you and or your legal representative are outside of Colombia, you will need to coordinate with your local attorney in order to execute documentation at a foreign consulate abroad. Note that this process will be more expensive than if you were to do this stuff locally. Plus, documents signed abroad will need to be shipped back to Colombia for use by your local legal service provider. Option three, local notary plus foreign consulate. If you or your legal representative are physically outside of Colombia, you may need to sign at a local notary and at a foreign consulate. Discuss logistics with your local legal service provider because this option can get pretty messy. Option four, notarize and apostille documentation. If you and or your legal representative are outside of Colombia but cannot get to a foreign consulate, ask your local attorney to determine if you can notarize an apostille documents for use in Colombia. Option 5, local attorney registers and then transfers company. This is a pretty popular workaround when you need to start your business ASAP but aren't in a country to get started. Essentially, your legal provider will register the company in their name and then transfer ownership to the new owners afterwards. Make sure you discuss the benefits and downsides of this option with your local attorney, as this option may be more expensive than the other alternatives. Another very important decision for your new business is determining whether it makes sense to register any new trademarks, or marcas as they're called locally, or even patents. For example, if you have an existing trademark, you should ask your foreign attorney to determine whether it can expand protection to the Colombian market. If you don't have a current trademark, you can always start the process in Colombia by applying to the Superintendents of Industry and Commerce and expand from there. Whatever you do, you should invest in an initial trademark analysis in order to determine whether your desired trademark is actually available for registration. The same advice would apply to patents and other intellectual property rights, though the actual mechanics and government entities involved will vary. If you're going to start a company in Colombia, you should know what types of licenses, permits, and other regulatory obligations will apply to your business. For this reason, we always recommend that clients conduct a comprehensive regulatory analysis that, at a minimum, identifies the specific licenses and permits required for your business, the specific public and private entities that issue those licenses and permits, any registration fees assessed by those entities, and any fees and additional expenses assessed on an ongoing basis. Make sure your local attorney outlines these issues clearly. You don't want to start a business only to realize that maintaining relevant permits is either just too expensive or too cumbersome. Apart from local permits and licensing, you should always want to make sure that your business is zoned correctly. This is probably much more relevant for brick and mortar businesses that rely on foot traffic to secure sales, but this issue affects all types of businesses in Colombia. Make sure your local attorney conducts a comprehensive zoning analysis for your business before you register your company. This analysis will necessarily involve interacting with the local government agencies, including the local Curaduría and Planeación office. You don't want to open a business, possibly invest a significant amount of money and effort, only to realize that you can't open that business in that specific location. And that's the end of our second episode in this series. We encourage you to watch the remaining episodes so you can gain additional insight into the business registration process in Colombia. We hope that the information we presented was both useful and practical. From myself and the rest of our local team in Colombia, thank you for joining us. Take care, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit subscribe and hit the bell to get the latest content from our local law firm in Colombia.